One night, I suddenly realized that my heart was still beating. My breath was still moving in and out. Yet the thing called life inside me had already run dry. I was existing but no longer truly living. I was walking in the dark forest without knowing when I had entered it, only knowing that all the familiar roads of my life had disappeared, replaced by blackened trees and twisted roots like the tangled thoughts inside my own mind. Above me there were no stars or moon. Beneath my feet was only the mud of mistakes I had tried to bury for years. People often talk about a midlife crisis, but only when you fall into it do you understand how terrifying it truly is. When a person turns back to look at his own life and realizes he has lived too long in incompleteness, in wrong choices, in all the things he should have done but never dared to do. I stood there alone, carrying ambitions that had already died, promises long forgotten, relationships that had quietly fallen apart. No family left to return to, no faith left to hold on to. Only one cold question, echoing inside my head. If I disappeared today, would anyone truly be heartbroken? I tried to walk toward a distant hill where a faint light flickered like the last trace of hope. But the moment I stepped forward, a leopard appeared, its eyes holding every pleasure I had ever chased. Then a lion emerged in proud silence, carrying the arrogance and reckless ego that once ruled my soul. And finally, a gaunt, starving wolf stood before me, its hollow eyes filled with endless hunger, just like the greed that had never learned to be satisfied inside my own heart. The three beasts did not need to attack me. Their presence alone was enough. I understood that I was no longer worthy of any upward path. Panic swallowed me, and I turned back, running into the familiar darkness. And at the very moment I thought I would be lost forever, a figure appeared before me. Not a demon, not a monster, but a man standing still in the dark forest, his eyes deep, as if he had already passed through many deaths. And when he finally spoke, his voice rough with time echoed straight into my soul. I know what you are afraid of, but you will be even more afraid if you keep running. If you wish to escape this forest, you must pass through the deepest place of darkness. You must enter hell. I stared at the man standing before me in the dark forest, his figure calm and unmoving as if fear itself had forgotten how to touch him. His cloak looked worn not by dirt but by time, and in his eyes there was no threat, only a depth so quiet that it made my heart tremble. "Who are you?" I asked with a shaking voice. And he answered slowly, as if every word had crossed centuries. "I was once a poet. I am already dead, and I do not belong to heaven." Those words fell into me like cold rain. A dead man guiding the living. Yet before I could question him further, he turned and began to walk. And strangely, the shadows in front of him seemed to pull apart as if the darkness itself was giving way. "My name is Virgil," he said. "I cannot take you to the final place, but I can lead you through the place no one wishes to remember. Hell." The word struck my chest like a blow. Hell. I wanted to refuse, to step back, to hide again inside the darkness that at least felt familiar. But in that moment I understood something bitter. I had been running my whole life, running from responsibility, from guilt, from the person I truly was. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Virgil stopped and looked back, his eyes heavy with a sadness that did not belong to one lifetime. "Because someone still remembers you, and because if you do not continue, you will die forever inside this forest, even while your body keeps breathing." I did not fully understand his words, but I felt the truth in them like a slow-burning fire. When I turned around, the path behind me was already gone. There was no return. Only one road left ahead, deeper into the heart of darkness. I clenched my hands and followed Virgil forward, and after a long, silent walk, a massive shape emerged through the mist. A towering gate carved with ancient words glowing faintly like dying embers. And before I could read them, Virgil spoke in a low, warning voice. "Beyond this gate, hope is no longer allowed to exist." We stood before a colossal gate rising from the thick, suffocating mist, so tall that I could not see its peak, as if the sky itself had been sealed shut with cold iron and darkness. Across its surface, faint red words glowed as if carved by blood. each letter dripping with the despair of countless souls. Before I could even read them, a chill ran straight from the back of my neck down my spine. Virgil stood beside me, and his voice sank low like it was speaking from inside a grave. This is the place where all hope is erased. Once you pass this gate, you no longer have the right to believe that everything will be all right. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding so violently it felt as if someone was striking it from inside my chest. Behind me, the dark forest had vanished. There was no road back, only the gate before me like a sentence passed long ago. As the massive doors began to open, a deep, grinding sound rose up like the mourning cry of a world being crushed alive. From within poured waves of moans, screams, pleas, curses tangled together into a sound no human language could describe. This was no longer the voice of people. It was the voice of pain stretched into eternity. I saw streams of souls drifting past my eyes. They had no clear shape, only trembling shadows. Some covered their faces and wept. Some clawed at the empty air. Some stood completely still, like hollow corpses. And in that moment, I understood that the most terrifying thing here was not fire, not demons, but the feeling that none of them believed in tomorrow anymore. Virgil stepped through the gate first without turning back, and I remained there for one brief second between two worlds. One behind me, the unfinished life I once called living. One ahead of me, a death with no escape. And then I stepped forward, and at that instant, a voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. I could not tell whose it was, but it was cold enough to paralyze my soul. You who enter here, abandon all hope. And in that moment I knew that I had truly entered hell. Before I could steady my breath, the world shifted again, and the sound of water rose out of the darkness. Not the sound of life, but the sound of something ancient and exhausted. The river Acheron flowed before us like a moving scar across the underworld, its surface black as ink and thick as grief. Along its banks, countless souls gathered in trembling silence, their faces pale with terror, their eyes wide with the realization that there was no turning back. Some clung to one another as if love could still protect them here. Some stood alone, staring into the water as if waiting for the final verdict of their existence. And then he appeared. Charon, the ferryman of the dead. His eyes burned, like dying embers beneath a hood of shadow. His voice cracked like broken stone as he shouted for the souls to come forward. They hesitated only for a heartbeat before fear drove them toward the boat. One by one, they were forced aboard like cargo with no name and no future. Their cries filled the air, but the river swallowed every sound without mercy. I stood frozen at the edge of the shore, watching the living world vanish from their eyes forever. And in that moment I realized that death was not a single instant but a journey that continued long after the heart stopped beating. When Charon finally turned his burning gaze toward me, he snarled that the living did not belong on his boat. But Virgil raised his hand and with calm authority silenced him. "It has been willed from above," he said, and the river itself seemed to obey. With trembling legs I stepped onto the boat among the dead, and as the vessel drifted away from the shore, I looked back one last time. Yet there was nothing left to see. No past, no home, no world of light. Only the endless black water carrying me toward what waited deeper inside hell. The boat drifted silently away from the black river, and when my feet touched the shore I was stunned to find that this place held no roaring fire, no screaming demons, no bloody punishments as I had imagined hell to be. Instead, limbo opened before me as a vast, pale gray world, endless and cold, like an afternoon that never reaches night. Countless souls were standing, sitting, slowly wandering like shadows with no destination. Their faces showed no agony, yet neither did they carry any trace of hope. In their eyes lived a quiet sorrow, the sorrow of someone who has stood outside the door of happiness for an entire lifetime without ever being allowed to step inside. Virgil whispered beside me that this was the realm of those who had lived honorably yet never touched the light of faith. Philosophers, scholars, heroes of ancient times. They were not punished, but they were not redeemed either. They were condemned to exist forever in the absence of God. I saw noble faces and intelligent eyes, Yet all of them shared the same nameless longing. The longing to reach something they knew with certainty they would never attain. And for the first time on this journey, I understood that some punishments require no whips, no blood, no torment at all. For simply allowing a soul to see heaven from far away and never be permitted to enter is enough to make loneliness eternal. The wind rose without warning like a sudden wrath. Limbo disappeared silently behind my back, and before me opened a realm of violent chaos where countless souls were torn forever inside a storm with no end. This was the circle of desire, where love at its sweetest became the most bitter punishment. Pale, human shapes were hurled upward and slammed downward again and again in endless despair. No one touched the ground. No one ever found rest. They were spun through the tempest, like torn leaves with no roots and no direction. I heard crying voices calling each other's names. Pleas tangled with regret that arrived far too late. Virgil said that in life they had let their hearts lead instead of their conscience. They loved until they lost themselves. And in death they were shredded eternally by the very wind of passion that once carried them. Within the furious vortex I saw two souls being swept along together, still struggling to reach for each other's hands, even as the storm ripped every movement apart. In their eyes, there was not only fear but also a love that had not yet faded. I called out to them, and their broken story drifted back to me through the screaming wind. A story that began with stolen glances, whispered vows in the darkness, heartbeats crossing the fragile line between right and wrong. They had loved each other enough to lose everything: honor, family, even their lives. And now they could not be separated even under eternal curse. When that trembling soul confessed that love itself had led them to death, I felt my heart collapse as if a hollow had been carved straight through it. For in that moment I understood a terrifying truth. Not every love redeems. Some loves are born only to destroy. I fell to my knees beneath the raging wind, tears streaming not from fear but from sorrow. Sorrow for them, and for myself as well. A man who had so many times mistaken passion for happiness. And as I collapsed within that storm, I knew that another final illusion about love had been torn from my soul forever. When the storm of desire faded behind me, the ground ahead sank downward like a colossal mouth opening to devour everything in its path. Black rain poured endlessly from above. Cold, foul, and heavy, like drops of sin that would never stop falling. Beneath that rain, countless souls lay buried in filthy mud, their bodies trembling, their faces twisted with an eternal hunger. This was the circle of those who had lived for the belly, for raw pleasure, for endless eating and drinking while forgetting their own souls. And in the center of that mire, Cerberus appeared, the three-headed beast with drooling jaws, eyes burning like smoldering coals and a swollen belly of greed that could never be satisfied. Every roar it released shook the ground. Every strike of its claws tore apart the souls that crawled in search of a moment of relief. I watched them and felt a chilling truth rise inside me. When a human being lives only to satisfy the flesh, he becomes imprisoned by that very flesh. They eat to forget. They drink to escape. They indulge to fill the emptiness in their hearts. Yet the more they fill it, the wider the emptiness grows. Virgil hurled a fist of mud into Cerberus's jaws, and the beast faltered for a breath. And in that brief moment, we passed through the crushing cries of the souls being ground beneath an endless hunger. And I understood that some people had already been dying slowly, every day through gluttony and indulgence, long before death ever came. Only after dying did they finally learn what it truly meant to be hungry. We left behind the mire of Cerberus and moved forward into a realm blazing red as if forged from fire and hatred itself. In the distance, the city of Dis rose like a colossal burning wound in the heart of hell. Its walls built of black iron, glowing with heat. Every massive stone, trembling with the rhythm of screams echoing from within. Upon the towering battlements, countless demonic silhouettes stood watch like souls already hollowed out by flame. As we approached the gate, the immense doors slammed shut before our eyes. The demons shrieked with laughter. Not the laughter of joy, but of certainty that despair would never find an escape. I looked at Virgil, and for the first time I saw hesitation pass through his eyes. He said that there were doors, The reason of man could never open on its own. And in that moment the air itself froze, every sound crushed into a single endless breath. From beyond the gate, an invisible pressure pressed down upon my soul, as if it meant to grind both memory and faith into dust. I stood there in terror for the first time, feeling the full helplessness of humanity before pure darkness. And then suddenly from above a beam of light split the red sky apart. An unseen step drew near, without form and without words. Yet with that single presence, the demons trembled, and the gates of Dis burst open in a scream of shattering metal. Virgil whispered that this was grace, the hand from above which no power in hell could resist. And as I stepped through those widening gates, I understood that there are battles man can never win by strength or intellect alone, but only by faith, however fragile it may be. The moment I stepped beyond the gates of Dis, I was swallowed by a world of fire and blood, where the ground split open into rivers of burning red that boiled with every pulse. Naked souls were hurled into the torrent and rose again in screams that scorched their throats dry. This was the circle of violence, where those who once used blood to settle their hatred now found themselves endlessly consumed by the very fire of blood. I saw killers who had stolen the lives of others now being slowly licked by flames along every strand of their souls. They thrashed in despair, but no one was left to hear their apologies that had come far too late. And deeper still lay the forest of the self-slain, a wasteland of twisted deed, brittle trees, black as despair frozen in time. Inside each trunk lived a soul that had once fallen into such hopelessness that it had raised a hand against its own life. Demonic birds plunged from above to tear at the bark, and with every strike the soul within cried out in living agony. I placed my hand upon a trembling tree and heard a sob burst out like blood from an open wound. The sob of a human being who had grown so weary that death seemed the only escape. Virgil stood beside me, and his voice grew heavy as stone as he said that when a person turns the blade against himself, he does not only destroy the body but shatters the last meaning of existence itself. I looked upon that forest of death, and for the first time on this journey, I no longer felt fear, only a suffocating sorrow. For I finally understood that some hells are built while a person is still alive, and death is merely the final door that closes upon that pain forever. We left behind the forest of the self-slain and entered another realm of hell, even more terrifying because it burned without flames and trapped without light. This was the domain of deception, the land of those who had lived their entire lives behind masks. All around me opened countless pits, descending one after another. And in each pit, human forms were twisted into grotesque punishments. Some were submerged in filthy stench, because in life they had lived only by flattery. Some had their heads twisted backward upon their necks, because they had always stolen glimpses of the future to deceive the present. Some wore cloaks that gleamed like gold on the outside, while molten lead crushed their souls from within. The air was filled with groans rising from every direction, not only from physical pain but from the unbearable weight of being completely exposed to the truth. Virgil told me that when a human being chooses to live by deception, he must one day accept being crushed by truth itself. I looked upon the distorted faces in those pits and saw that every one of them had once been a master of words, of reputation, of power. They knew how to stand before the crowd with a righteous smile, while betrayal multiplied endlessly behind their backs. And now there were no more lights, no audience, no stage. Only themselves standing before the reality they had always feared most. And in that moment, a cold understanding settled into my heart. Some people never need to sell their souls to demons, because they have already lived as demons for a very long time. And the most painful part of their punishment was not the torment itself, but finally being forced to face their true selves at last. Naked, corrupted, and with nowhere left to hide. We left behind the pits of deception and descended even deeper, where a sudden cold flooded the space, like an invisible hand tightening around my soul. Before me there was no fire, no smoke, only a vast white sea of ice, silent and terrifying. This was the realm of betrayal, the coldest place in all of hell. The thick frozen surface was clear as glass, and beneath it countless human bodies were trapped in different positions, some with only half their faces exposed, some completely buried, their eyes wide open in eternal despair. The tears that flowed from them turned instantly into ice upon their cheeks. Virgil said that fire is the punishment of burning rage, but ice is the punishment of a heart that has already died. I saw those who had betrayed friends, betrayed teachers, betrayed ideals, betrayed even their own families. In life they had severed with their own hands the final thread that tied them to humanity, and in death they were submerged forever in a cold that would never melt. I walked across the frozen surface and heard the cracking echoes beneath each step. Every fracture was a relationship torn apart. Every hollow sound was a promise once buried alive. And for the first time I understood why betrayal was punished so severely. Because when a person betrays, he does not only wound another, he murders the last remaining piece of humanity within himself. We reached the very center of the frozen sea where all sound seemed to be completely swallowed. And there I saw him, Satan, the one who had once been the most radiant of angels, now locked motionless at the deepest core of hell, his colossal body embedded in the ice like a mountain of despair. 3 faces turned toward 3 different directions, each face gnawing endlessly upon a great betrayer. His enormous wings no longer built for flight but beating in blind instinct, creating the freezing winds that endlessly thicken the ice around him. And in that moment, I realized a terrifying truth. Every desperate struggle he makes to escape is the very thing that binds him more tightly within this frozen chain. Virgil said that Satan is not the king of hell. He is only its greatest prisoner, the one condemned by his own rebellion. I looked into his hollow eyes and saw no fire of rage, no trace of power, only an infinite emptiness of isolation and defeat. And in that silent instant, I understood that the more fiercely one once craved power, the deeper one falls into loneliness when collapse finally comes. No one tortures Satan here. His betrayal itself is the eternal punishment that will never end. We moved along the colossal frozen body of Satan, and with every step I felt the gravity of fear slowly reversing itself, until Virgil signaled for me to turn. And in that instant the entire world seemed to flip upside down. What had been the deepest bottom of hell suddenly became the beginning of an upward path. We climbed in silence. No more screaming. No more fire. Only the cold, fading little by little with every step, until a strange wind touched my skin. Not the wind of ice, but a breeze carrying the scent of freedom. And then from far away, a fragile light appeared. Faint yet persistent, like the final heartbeat of hope. When I stepped out of that endless tunnel of darkness, I lifted my head, and for the first time after an immeasurable stretch of time, I saw the sky again. I saw the stars again. They were not dazzling, not blinding, but bright enough to remind me that darkness is not the end. Virgil stood beside me with calm eyes like a man who had fulfilled his final mission. And in that moment I understood that not everyone is led into the light. But everyone has the right to believe they are worthy of stepping out of the darkness. And I walked on carrying everything that had been lost, everything that had hurt, and also the small, fragile faith that no matter how deep a human being may fall, he can still find the way back if he dares to lift his eyes toward the stars.